There is a skill older than the bow, older than the rifle, older than every piece of gear in your pack right now. And it is the single most powerful advantage a hunter can have. Most hunters never learn it. They spend thousands on optics, on scent eliminators, on trail cameras, on clothing designed in a lab. And still they sit, they wait, they hope. Meanwhile, the hunters who actually fill tags year after year aren't relying on any of that. They're reading the ground. They're doing something humans have done for at least 4,000 years, something scientists now call the oldest form of empirical reasoning on Earth. And if you learn it, you won't just find more game. You'll understand the land in a way that no trail camera or GPS pin will ever show you. I want to be clear about something before we go any further. This isn't about going primitive. I'm not going to tell you to throw away your rifle and pick up a spear. What I'm going to show you is the actual technique, the mental framework and the physical skill set that indigenous hunters across Africa, Australia, the Americas, and Asia used to locate, pursue, and harvest game with a consistency that modern hunters would struggle to match. It's called tracking, real tracking, not following a blood trail after the shot, not glancing at a print in the mud and thinking, "Yep, deer." I'm talking about a layered system of reading the earth, footprints, scat, vegetation disturbance, gait patterns, substrate aging, behavioral prediction. That, when practiced, gives you more actionable intelligence about what animals are doing, where they're going, and why, than anything a battery-powered device can offer. And here's what makes this so important for the modern hunter. This technique doesn't replace your gear. It makes all of it work better. Your stand placement improves because you're no longer guessing. Your stalk gets tighter because you understand how the animal moves through terrain. Your shot opportunity increases because you've already predicted where that animal is heading and why. Everything downstream gets better when the foundation is this old, this tested, and this deeply rooted in how the human brain was designed to operate. Louis Liebenberg, a South African researcher who spent decades hunting alongside the San people of the Kalahari, published a book in 1990 called The Art of Tracking, The Origin of Science. His central argument was extraordinary but hard to refute. The cognitive process required for advanced animal tracking, forming hypotheses, testing them against evidence, revising your model in real time, is the same intellectual process used in modern physics and mathematics. Tracking, he argued, may be the original form of science. It's not a folk skill. It's not a quaint bushcraft hobby. It is the root of how humans learn to think systematically about the natural world. And when you develop this ability, you don't just become a better hunter. You become a sharper observer of everything around you. Now let me walk you through the layers of this skill because it's not one thing. It's a system. And the reason most hunters overlook it is because each layer seems simple on its own. But stacked together, they create a picture of the landscape that no amount of money can buy. The first layer, and the one most hunters think they already understand, is track identification. Here's what separates a casual glance from genuine tracking. A real tracker doesn't just see the track. They see the conversation the animal was having with the ground. The depth of the print tells you the animal's weight and speed. The spacing between tracks, the stride length tells you the gait, walking, trotting, bounding, or fleeing. A whitetail buck walking casually through soft ground will leave a symmetrical print with clear edges and a consistent spacing. That same buck spooked by a coyote will throw its dewclaws, splay its hooves, and leave deep gouges with uneven spacing and a much longer stride. Same animal, completely different story. The sand trackers Liebenberg studied could not only identify the species from a single print, they could determine the sex, the age class, and in many cases, the specific individual animal. Tested under controlled scientific conditions, their accuracy rate was 98%. That's not folklore. That's a peer-reviewed study published by Stander and colleagues in 1997. Now here's where this gets practical for you. Next time you're walking to your stand, stop at the first clear track you see. Don't just glance at it. Crouch down, look at the edges. Are they crisp or crumbling? Is the soil inside the print the same moisture level as the soil around it? Or has it already started to dry? Are both halves of the hoof print symmetrical? Or is one side deeper, suggesting the animal was favoring one leg or turning? Is there a small ridge of pushed-up dirt on the toe end, indicating forward momentum? Or is the print flat and even, meaning the animal was standing still? Every single one of those details is a word in a sentence, and the sentence is telling you what that animal was doing and feeling when it stepped there. And this is where the modern hunter's education usually stops. They learn to tell a deer track from an elk track, a turkey print from a coyote print, and they think that's tracking. It's not. That's the alphabet. You haven't started reading yet. The second layer is aging the sign. This is where the real intelligence starts flowing. A fresh track in morning mud has crisp, defined edges. Water hasn't seeped in yet. The soil inside the print is still damp from the pressure of the hoof. By midday, those edges soften. In dry conditions, they crumble. In wet conditions, water fills the depression. Frost crystallizes along the ridges overnight. Every hour that passes writes another sentence in the story. A skilled tracker can look at a set of prints and tell you not just what walked through, but roughly when. And roughly, in this context, can mean the difference between a buck that's a half-mile ahead and a buck that's been gone since midnight. That distinction alone can save you an entire day of sitting in the wrong spot. The legendary Maine guide Hal Blood built his entire reputation on this principle. He would find a single buck track in the snow and follow it, sometimes for miles, reading the age of every print along the way. When the track freshened, when the edges were sharper, the snow less disturbed, the stride more deliberate, he knew he was closing the gap. That's not patience. That's intelligence. That's a man operating on 4,000-year-old firmware that most hunters never bother to install. If you're finding value in this, take a second to hit that subscribe button. This channel is built for hunters who want to think, not just buy. The kind of people who understand that a quiet mind in the timber is worth more than a loud wallet at the pro shop. If that's you, you're in the right place. Third layer of tracking, and this is where it gets genuinely powerful, is what Liebenberg called speculative tracking. This is the highest level of the skill, and it's where tracking crosses from observation into prediction. At this level, the tracker isn't just following prints. They're thinking like the animal. They've absorbed so much knowledge about how a particular species moves through a particular type of terrain, at a particular time of day, under particular weather conditions, that they can leave the track entirely, move ahead through the landscape, and pick up the trail again hundreds of yards away. They are modeling the animal's decision-making in real time. Think about what that means for a modern hunter. You don't need to follow every print. You read enough to understand the animal's intent, feeding, bedding, traveling, fleeing. And then you use the terrain itself to predict where it's going next. You cut across a drainage because you know that a whitetail moving southwest at that speed, at that time of morning, in that wind, is almost certainly heading for the thick cover on the north-facing slope where it beds. You get there first. That's not luck. That's not technology. That's a 4,000-year-old operating system running on a brain that was literally designed for this. Let me give you a practical example of how this works in real hunting conditions. Say you pick up a set of fresh buck tracks on a frosty November morning. The prints are heading northwest along a fence line. The stride is steady. He's not spooked, he's traveling. You know from previous scouting that there's a creek bottom about 400 yards northwest, thick with cedars and honeysuckle, and beyond that a standing cornfield that hasn't been cut yet. It's 7 in the morning. The wind is out of the south. That buck is almost certainly going to follow the fence line to the creek, drop down into the thick cover where the wind carries his scent from behind, and bed on the south-facing slope where the morning sun warms the ground. You don't need to follow his tracks all the way there. You need to loop wide, get downwind of that bedding area, and set up between the creek crossing and the cover. If you move quietly and get there before he does, you'll have a shot opportunity that no trail camera, no food plot, and no cellular alert could have given you. That's speculative tracking applied to a modern whitetail hunt. And it works because the deer is doing exactly what deer have always done. And you're doing exactly what hunters have always done. You're just doing it with awareness instead of equipment. And this connects to something most hunters have never thought about. Your brain evolved for tracking. The neurological hardware you carry in your skull was shaped, over hundreds of thousands of years, by the demands of exactly this kind of work. Pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, predictive modeling, lateral thinking under uncertainty. These aren't skills you learn in a classroom. They're wired into you. You just haven't used them because the hunting industry has spent the last 50 years telling you to sit in a box and stare at a food plot. There is nothing wrong with stand hunting. It's effective, and it fills freezers. But if it's the only thing you do, you're using about 10% of the cognitive toolkit your ancestors handed you. Tracking activates the rest. Sherwood Washburn, an anthropologist at Harvard, pointed out something fascinating in the late 70s. The modern human brain, your brain, right now, reached its current size and complexity during a period when every single human was a hunter-gatherer. The same neural architecture that allows a physicist to track subatomic particles through a cloud chamber is the architecture that evolved to track a kudu through the Kalahari. Steven Pinker called this Wallace's paradox, the puzzle of why humans have brains far more powerful than simple survival seems to require. Liebenberg's answer was elegant. Survival did require it. Speculative tracking, the highest form of the skill, demands hypothesis formation, evidence evaluation, creative reasoning, and real-time decision-making under life-or-death stakes. That's not a simple skill, that's science, and your brain was built for it. When you track an animal, you're not learning something foreign. You're remembering something native. The fourth layer is scat and feeding sign analysis. And I know this isn't the glamorous part, but this is where consistent hunters separate from weekend hunters. Animal droppings are a direct biological record. Fresh scat is moist, dark, and has a strong odor. It tells you the animal was here recently, sometimes within the hour. Older scat dries, loses color, loses scent. The contents of the scat tell you what the animal has been eating, which tells you what food source it's keying on, which tells you where it's likely feeding, which tells you where to set up. A pile of deer pellets loaded with acorn fragments near a white oak ridge in October is not just a sign. It's a map. It's pointing you to the exact tree that animal is returning to, probably tonight. But here's the deeper insight most hunters miss. The composition of scat changes with the seasons, and those changes tell you what the animal's priorities are right now. Not last week, not in general, but today. In early fall, when deer are loading up on carbohydrates before the rut, you'll find pellets clustered with hard mast fragments. During the rut, bucks eat less, move more, and their scat becomes smaller, drier, and more scattered. In late season, when everything shifts to survival, the scat changes again. More fiber, more browse material, less volume. Each phase tells you something about what the animal needs, which tells you where it's going to be. This is biological intelligence. It's free. It's sitting right there on the ground, and most hunters step over it because nobody taught them to read it. Feeding sign works the same way. Browse lines on saplings, shredded bark from antler rubs, scrapes pawed into the dirt with a licking branch overhead. Every one of these tells you something about not just presence, but behavior. A rub on a 4-inch diameter cedar means a different size animal than a rub on a 2-inch sapling. The height of the rub tells you about the animal's body size. The freshness of the exposed wood, bright and wet versus dry and gray, tells you how recently it happened. Stack all of these signs together in a single area, and you're not guessing where to hunt. You're reading a bulletin board the animal posted for you. The fifth layer is what old-school trackers call reading the terrain, and this is the one that transforms everything. Animals don't move randomly. They move along paths of least resistance, paths of greatest cover, and paths that connect resources, food, water, bedding, escape routes. When you learn to read terrain the way a tracker reads terrain, You stop seeing a hillside as just geography. You start seeing it as a network of corridors. You see the saddle between two ridges, and you know that's a travel route because animals, like water, flow through the low points. You see a bench, a flat shelf partway up a steep slope, and you know that's a bedding area because the animal can see downhill while the wind carries scent from above. You see the edge where thick cover meets open ground, and you know that's a transition zone where animals are most vulnerable and most cautious, which is exactly where you want to be. This is terrain literacy. It's the ability to look at a piece of ground and understand, before you ever see a track, where the animals are most likely to move, and why. And it's not magic, it's geometry, it's biology, it's physics. It's the wind and the slope and the cover density and the food source location, all intersecting in ways that make certain spots far more productive than others. The indigenous hunters who practiced this 4,000 years ago didn't have topo maps. They didn't need them. They had something better. They had a lifetime of reading the ground and watching how animals respond to it. Here's how you start developing this skill. Next time you're scouting a new piece of ground, don't go straight to the trail cameras. Walk the property boundary first. Note every terrain feature. Where are the saddles? Where are the benches? Where does thick timber transition to open hardwoods? Where are the water sources? Now, before you ever look for a track, draw a mental map of where you think the animals travel. Connect the food to the water to the bedding with the most sheltered, lowest energy routes. Then go look for sign. I guarantee you'll find tracks and trails in at least half the spots you predicted. That's not because you're psychic. It's because you're starting to think like the animal, and the animal is thinking about the same terrain features you are: cover, food, water, escape, energy conservation. This is the same cognitive process the sand trackers call thinking yourself into the animal. It's not mystical, it's deeply logical. And once you start doing it, you'll never look at a hillside the same way again. Now, here's where I want to address something directly, because I know some of you are thinking it. You're thinking, this sounds great, but I hunt pressured public land. I don't have time to become a Kalahari bushman. Fair enough. You don't need to be one. What you need is to take one element of this system and start practicing it every time you're in the field. And I'll tell you which one will pay off the fastest. Learn to age tracks. That single skill will change your hunting more than any new release aid, any upgraded scope, or any new camo pattern ever will. Start by making your own tracks in different substrates: mud, sand, clay, leaf litter, snow, and then coming back to check them at 2 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, and 24 hours. Watch how they change. Watch how the edges soften, how water fills the depression, how wind deposits debris. Do this 10 or 15 times, and you'll start to develop a calibrated internal clock for how old a track is. And once you have that, every track you encounter in the field becomes time-stamped. You'll know if the animal that made it is close or gone. You'll know if you should slow down and get your rifle ready or keep moving to find fresher sign. The sixth layer, and this is one that almost nobody talks about, is reading the behavior of other animals to locate your quarry. This is something the sand trackers and Native American hunters were masters of. A jay scolding from a treetop, a squirrel alarm barking and flicking its tail, a flock of crows circling and diving, a herd of cattle or horses staring fixedly in one direction. Every animal in the ecosystem is a sensor, and they're all broadcasting information constantly. When you learn to interpret those signals, you gain an early warning network that covers acres of ground you can't see. Here's a concrete example. You're slipping along a ridgeline in the pre-dawn dark. You can't see 50 yards, but you hear a blue jay go off about 200 yards to your east, and then another one picks up the alarm 100 yards south of the first. That's a moving disturbance. Something is walking through there, and it's big enough to bother the jays but not fast enough to be a predator in full pursuit. That's probably your deer. Now you have a direction, a speed, and a rough location, all without seeing a single track. You can adjust your approach, get downwind, and intercept. The ancient trackers didn't have binoculars. They had jays, and the J's never run out of batteries. The seventh layer is understanding how light and shadow affect your ability to read sign. This is deeply practical and almost never taught. Cracks are three-dimensional. They're depressions in the ground, and depressions are only visible when shadow falls inside them. When the sun is behind you, light fills the track and it disappears. When the sun is in front of you, when you're walking into the light, the shadows deepen inside each print and the track becomes vivid. This is why the old trackers always kept the sun between themselves and the spoor. It's why tracking is easiest in the early morning and late afternoon, when the sun is low and shadows are long. At midday, with the sun directly overhead, even fresh tracks can become nearly invisible. This is the kind of knowledge that costs nothing and changes everything. You already have the sun. You already have eyes. You just need to know the geometry. Once you understand it, you'll choose your direction of travel based on sun angle before you even start hunting. You'll position yourself to see sign that everyone else walks right over. And this isn't obscure bushcraft theory. This is fundamental tracking technique that every sand hunter in the Kalahari, every Apache scout on the frontier, and every professional tracker in southern Africa has used for centuries. There's a practical application here that I use personally, and it has made me a noticeably better scout. When I'm walking a new piece of ground in the morning, I plan my route so that I'm moving generally eastward, into the rising sun. Every track, every depression, every subtle disturbance in the leaf litter pops out, because the shadows are falling toward me. In the afternoon, I reverse it and move westward. If I need to check a specific area at midday when the sun is high and shadows are short, I get low. I'll actually kneel down and look across the ground surface at a shallow angle, because even at noon, a shallow viewing angle can reveal depression that a standing person would never notice. This is a technique the sand trackers use instinctively, and it works in Virginia hardwoods just as well as it works in Kalahari sand. The physics of light doesn't change with the continent. There's an eighth layer that ties everything together, and it might be the most important one of all: the concept of the track trap. This is another ancient technique that modern hunters can use immediately. A track trap is any surface that reliably records and preserves animal sign. The sand trackers would sometimes prepare patches of ground, smoothing sand near water holes or along known travel corridors, specifically to create ideal conditions. For reading tracks, you can do the same thing. A muddy creek crossing, a sandy wash, a section of trail where you've raked the leaves back to expose bare soil, even a patch of fresh snow. By creating or identifying surfaces that hold clear prints, you build a monitoring network across your hunting area that tells you, every time you check it, exactly what has been moving through and when. This is infinitely more informative than a trail camera, because a track trap gives you direction of travel, speed, gait, number of animals, relative size, and time since passage, all from a single surface. A trail camera gives you a picture and a timestamp. That's useful, but it's one-dimensional compared to what the ground tells you. And track traps cost nothing: a rake and 10 minutes of work at each location. Set up 5 or 6 of them across a property and check them every few days. Within 2 weeks, you'll have a movement map that's more detailed and more dynamic than anything technology can provide. You'll know which trails are active, which crossings are being used, what times the animals are moving, and whether the pattern is consistent or shifting. That's the kind of intelligence that lets you make decisions with confidence instead of hope. Let me bring this all together with something that might reframe how you think about your time in the field. The average American hunter spends somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 a year on the sport. Licenses, ammunition, fuel, food, gear, clothing, optics. It adds up fast. And the average success rate for whitetail hunters in most states hovers around 30 to 40%. That means more than half the hunters who spend that money come home without an animal, and a significant portion of the ones who do succeed attribute it to being in the right stand at the right time, which is a polite way of saying they got lucky within a prepared setup. Now, what if, Instead of buying one more piece of gear this year, you spent 50 hours practicing track identification and aging. Not in a course, not with an app, just you, the ground, and a field guide. 50 hours over a year is less than an hour a week. And at the end of that year, you'd have a skill that doesn't break, doesn't need batteries, doesn't become obsolete, and gets better the more you use it. You'd walk into the woods seeing a layer of information that's invisible to the hunter next to you. You'd make better decisions about where to place your stand, where to begin your stalk, and when to move and when to stay still. Your 30% success rate wouldn't just nudge up a few points. Over time, with compounding skill, it could double or more. I want to be honest about something. This isn't easy at first. When you start, you'll misidentify tracks. You'll misjudge age. You'll follow a trail for a quarter mile only to realize it was made by a doe when you were looking for a buck, or it was 12 hours old when you thought it was 2. That's fine. That's the process. The sand trackers who achieve 98% accuracy didn't start there. They started as children, following their fathers and uncles, making mistakes, being corrected, making better mistakes, until the skill became as natural as reading a road sign. You're starting later, but you have one advantage they didn't. You have reference materials. You have field guides with exact measurements for every species in your area. You have plaster casting kits that cost $10 and let you create a permanent record of any track you find. You have a phone camera that lets you photograph and compare. The feedback loop is available to you if you choose to use it. The only question is whether you will, because that's the nature of tracking. It compounds. Every hour you spend reading sign makes the next hour more productive. You start recognizing patterns you couldn't see before. Subtle differences in track depth that tell you an animal was carrying weight on one side. Maybe an injury. Maybe it was turning its head to look at something. A slight drag mark on the leading edge of a print that tells you the animal was tired, was moving slowly, was probably close to bedding. These are details that no trail camera on Earth can show you, because they require you to be there, on the ground, thinking, interpreting, deciding. And that's what separates this from everything else the hunting industry sells you. Gear is passive. You buy it, you put it out there, and you hope it works. Tracking is active. It demands your full attention, your full intelligence, and your full presence. And in return, it gives you something no product can. A genuine understanding of the animal you're pursuing and the ground it lives on. I want to mention one more thing that doesn't get enough attention. The CyberTracker Conservation Program, founded by Liebenberg himself, developed a formal tracking certification system. It uses a simple, elegant method. A certified evaluator walks you through the bush, points to tracks and sign, and you identify them. Your accuracy is scored. The highest level certification, the Track and Sign Specialist, requires consistent accuracy above 90% across hundreds of evaluations. It's one of the hardest field certifications in the world, and you don't need to pursue it formally to benefit from the principle behind it. The principle is this: your skill is only as good as your accuracy, and your accuracy is only as good as your practice. Go into the field with the intent to verify. Don't just guess at a track and move on. Study it, photograph it, measure it. Go home and compare it to reference materials. Come back and check your conclusion. This feedback loop is what turns casual observation into genuine expertise. Drop a comment below and tell me what tracking sign you pay the most attention to right now. Tracks, scat, rubs, or maybe you haven't started yet and this video is the push you needed. Either way, I want to hear from you. This channel grows when people who care about real fieldcraft show up and share what they know. Let me leave you with this. 4,000 years ago, a hunter walked out of camp with nothing but a spear and the knowledge in his head. He read the ground the way you read a sentence. He knew what animal passed when it passed, how fast it was moving, whether it was healthy or injured, whether it was alone or with others, and where it was probably going. He didn't have a scope. He didn't have a rangefinder. He didn't have a truck to drive to the trailhead. And yet his success rate, anthropologists tell us, was remarkably high. Not because he was physically superior, but because he could think. He could observe, he could reason, he could predict. That capacity lives in you right now. It's been there since before you were born. Every time you notice a broken twig, every time you pause because something on the ground caught your eye, every time you feel that instinctive pull to look a certain direction, that's the ancient tracking brain waking up. It just needs practice. It just needs dirt time. It just needs you to stop outsourcing your awareness to a machine and start using the most sophisticated piece of hunting technology ever created: the human mind trained on the ground. So here's your challenge. The next time you go into the field, leave 30 minutes early. Not to get to your stand sooner, to walk slowly. With your eyes on the ground, find one track, study it, age it. Follow it for as far as you can. Don't worry about whether you find the animal, just read the story. See where it leads. Note the gait changes. Note where the animal paused, where it sped up, where it turned. Ask yourself why it made each decision. Was it responding to wind, to a sound, to terrain? Was it moving toward food or away from something? You won't get all the answers right. That's not the point. The point is that you're asking the questions. And every time you ask, your brain gets a little better at answering. Because that one track, that one set of prints in the mud, is the beginning of a skill that has been passed down for 4,000 years. A skill that the hunting industry can't sell you because it doesn't come in a box. A skill that gets sharper every time you use it. And a skill that, once you have it, will change the way you hunt for the rest of your life. That's the technique. It was never lost, it was just forgotten. And now you know it exists. I'll see you in the next one.